Today's podcast episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com. And if you'll go over and check them out, they are the #1 electronic health record system for counselors and therapists. They will provide everything you need to make your practice run smoothly and efficiently. And go check them out, TherapyNotes.com. And if you'll use the coupon code Gordon, just GORDON, you can get your first 2 months free. TherapyNotes.com. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 117 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer, and I'm so glad you've joined me for the podcast. If this is your first time listening in, welcome. Hope you'll find the information on this podcast and the content helpful for you in your practice and your journey. Or if you're just curious, glad you're here. And if you're coming back for more, glad you're back. And I hope wherever you might be listening to this, you take time to subscribe to the podcast. So I'm excited about our guest for today. It's a person, again, one of those people I met online, and I've got Jonathan Van Viegen that's going to be joining me. And Jonathan has a really unique practice, and that Jonathan is actually, his practice is pretty remote. In fact, as we recorded this episode, he was actually in Japan. But Jonathan's superpower is really doing online therapy and really also online coaching with clients. And so I'm looking forward for you to hear from him and just kind of learn about the business model that he's using and what he's doing to help other therapists kind of find this new way of doing therapy. It's not really new anymore. Online therapy is something that we're pretty familiar with, but his niche is pretty unique in that he's operating from the other side of the world, so to speak. So anyway, looking forward to you learning more about Jonathan. A few things coming up. I've got some exciting things coming down the pike. First of all, is got another webinar coming up, partnering again with my friend Julie Harris over at Green Oak Accounting, and we're going to be doing a webinar on March the 17th, St. Patrick's Day. So we're going to be talking about employees versus contractors, or contractors versus employees, and just about hiring people into your practice, and some different models around that, and just teaching the things that people need to know when they're thinking about adding clinicians or adding employees or adding contractors, and some of the ins and outs of that. So I'm really looking forward to this webinar. And I think it's, again, most of our webinars that we do are really in response to questions we hear from people like you out there that are just curious about things or trying to figure things out for their practice. So you can go check that out at practiceoftherapy.com/hiring webinar. That's practiceoftherapy.com/hiring webinar, and you can register for that free webinar coming up on March the 17th. And even if you don't think you can be there at the time that we do the live webinar, sign up anyway, and that way you'll get access to the replay when it comes out. So again, that's an upcoming webinar I wanted to let you know about. The other thing that I wanted to let you know about, or just kind of mention here, is, today, as I mentioned in other episodes, I tend to put my podcast together on Fridays and pull it all together to send over to my virtual assistant Rachel to do all the post-production stuff. But anyway, I got to spend the day with my friend David Hall. Those of you that have listened to previous episodes know about David. He is the person behind Psych Maven. And one of the things I wanted to say about that is that one of the things that I have come to value more than anything else within my private practice is having trusted colleagues and trusted friends that you can talk with about private practice stuff and the business side of things. And so David is one of those people for me, and that we just are brutally honest with each other. We share our numbers and we just talk about our practices. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is that when I do that, it really gives me the support I need, but also gives me other ideas of different ways of doing things. The way he runs his practice is not at all like I run mine. There's some similarities, and it's not that one way is better than the other. It's just that we've got two different kinds of practices and two different locations, but it's so valuable to get that information and to get to share those things and to do it with a trusted colleague. And so if you've listened to the previous episodes, I've got some focus groups that I'm putting together, and that is the whole purpose of the focus groups, is to have a group of trusted colleagues that you can get together with regularly and share your ideas, get feedback, brainstorm with them, get some mentoring, some coaching, all of those things around your practice. So if you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com/focus group, you can apply to the next cohorts that I'm getting started. And the plan is at this point, it's going to be, those will be starting in March. And this episode is coming out, probably the 1st of March. So this, happy March, everyone. No, actually, this episode's coming out on the 24th. I'm sorry, I'm a week ahead on my calendar. But anyway, those will be coming out later in March, the start of the focus groups. And my hope is to have 2 cohorts start around the same time, and really dividing those up into groups of people, those people that are just getting started in private practice and really trying to learn the whole business side of private practice and really wanting help of knowing what to do and what direction to go. And then another group, another cohort of those that are a little more, maybe a little farther along with their practices, a little more advanced, if you will. Maybe they've been in practice for a while now, but they're maybe feeling stuck. But anyway, I want to just give you a personal invitation to apply to one of the focus groups that will be starting in March. Focus groups aren't necessarily for everyone, but what it would require of you is just a commitment of meeting 2 times a month, and we'll meet via Zoom meetings, and it'll be small groups. And I'm going to limit it to probably 8 people in each group, and then we can all have really frank conversations about our practices and share ideas. And you can get feedback from me along with the other people in the group. And the commitment is for 4 months. The cost is $89 for a month for 4 months. So I tried to price it at a place that is going to be reasonable for folks. So anyway, I want to invite you to go check that out to see if that's something that you would be interested in. And if you have any questions of me about that, or not sure if it's a good fit for you, or want to find out a little more, you can always shoot me an email at gordon@practiceoftherapy.com, and I'm happy to start that conversation with you to see if it's a good fit for you, and see if it's going to be valuable to you in your practice, and that you'll absolutely get a return on your investment of what you put into it. So anyway, go check that out, practiceoftherapy.com/focus group, and you can apply there and hopefully get started. I look forward to hearing from you. So, like I said, today's guest is Jonathan Van Viegen, and I'm so glad for you to get to know Jonathan. And without further ado, here is Jonathan Van Viegen. Well, hello, folks, and welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so happy to have with me today Jonathan Van Viegen. And Jonathan had reached out to me about being on the podcast, and we connected. And so, Jonathan, welcome.
Yes, thank you so much, Gordon, for having me.
Yes, and Jonathan has got a very unique practice, and I think folks are going to enjoy hearing from Jonathan just about how he has built, I guess, a completely online therapy practice, really, isn't it, Jonathan?
Mm-hmm.
And then lives internationally, lives in Japan and Vietnam, I believe you said
Yeah,
earlier.
just recently. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm anxious for you all to hear from that. So, Jonathan, as I start out with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your private practice journey and how you've ended up where you've ended up and how you've landed where you've landed?
Sure thing. Well, I'm probably guilty of driving my wife crazy being a serial entrepreneur for the entire time that I've known her and years before that. But after graduating with my marriage and family therapy degree and practicing for less than a year, I took my wife and we went to Thailand for 1 month for the last month of my wife's maternity leave of our second daughter. And to make a long story short, we caught the travel bug and we went back to Canada and said, let's uproot our life and sell everything that wasn't nailed down, including the Christmas decorations. Packed our bags and took our 2 young girls on the road. And I was this therapist who said, talk therapy, this can happen online. We've got Zoom, we've got WebEx, why not? And as naive as I was, I thought I would just hang up my virtual shingle and be this wealthy online therapist that was able to travel all over the world. And, the reality set in that it was going to be a lot more difficult getting clients than just putting a post up on Facebook or Instagram. So,
right.
Yeah.
So, and you have, but you've built a pretty successful practice, and now you are moving into just kind of helping others do the same thing, using the same model. Tell us what you've learned so far.
Through a ton of blood, sweat, and a ton of tears, I'd gone back to my wife countless times and said, I still haven't cracked the code of getting clients online. I still could not figure out how to get online clients. And I've never been one to want to join the BetterHelp, the Talkspace. I could get going on a rant about how undervalued we are as therapists. And I was never that type of person that would say, I'm just going to go join or work for an EAP or a panel or get on insurance and whatnot. So I had to do it on my own, but I certainly didn't have any understanding of how to get clients online and what that process was. And it took the better part of a year to figure out how to crack that code and how to really warm people up to my work, my message, my offer, before I started getting clients. And slowly but surely, I started seeing some fruits of my efforts, and I was blogging regularly and started making YouTube videos and whatnot. And it happened slowly but surely. Now, obviously, we're years further down the line, and we've got a system, and we know exactly how to do it. But it definitely took quite some time to figure out. So.
Right. And so, as you did this, what was the point at which you really felt like it started to kind of take off and really get some traction?
I suppose it was when I was on Instagram and I've been DMing with people, and DMing is, if you're growing an online practice, you're doing it within the DM. It's not just doing what we call the post and run. And so I was guilty of that for a long time, where you'd spend an hour putting together a great Instagram post and you'd have all your hashtags lined up and you'd think you're being really clever. And I remember telling one of my posts was telling couples to put their phones down so that they could spend more time engaged with each other. And I'm a relationship therapist. That's great advice, but it's terrible for social media, because what did I tell Instagram users to do? I said, put your phone down. Right? Yeah. So obviously Instagram's not going to show that post to very many people. But when I started understanding the algorithm and I started understanding that it's about adding value to people's lives, but then following up with them and engaging in asking questions and commenting and building relationships, that's when it started to take off. And sure enough, people started DMing me, asking to work with me. And it took some time to figure out that that's what this process is. This process is about building relationships, authentic relationships, not just looking for clients. So, and that was probably the point.
Yeah. And that's a theme I hear over and over again. I know, just as we're recording this, our previous week's podcast episode that was the theme of that too, is just being genuine about your contacts and
Mhm.
being able to build those relationships with people.
Mhm.
That whole, kind of saying that we hear a lot in the online space, to know, like, and trust.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
huge thing. So as you built your practice online, um, kind of, if somebody were just starting to do this, how would you tell them to start, and maybe what would be some things that would be maybe some top things that they should be thinking about or doing in this?
Great question. The very first place I start is really to pick a message and create a message about, particularly in the online space, create a message about what you do, how you do it, and who your solution's for. And so when it comes to online marketing and growing your online practice, and I've done this now with countless therapists, and I've done webinars and I've trained people, and it all boils down to generalities die and specificity thrives. And so if you don't have a very crystal clear message about, you can't work with both genders, you can't work with depression and anxiety, you've got to pick one. It's got to be one thing that you want to do. So I say, find that passion, that intersection of what you love to do and the client that you love to help the most. And when you find that intersection, that's where your niche is. And it's actually more like a nano niche, not a niche, but a nano niche.
Mm-hmm.
And then you craft a message surrounding that of who your ideal client is, what your solution is, and what their biggest problem is. And that's where that's where we start. So we have an 8-week program that we work with our clients right now. And that's the very first place we start, is just finding that intersection of their nano niche and who they love to help.
Right. Right. Yeah. That makes sense as I think about it, because, for those of us that are still doing kind of brick and mortar kind of businesses, really our competition, if you want to call it that, are just therapists within our local area. Mm-hmm. But for online therapy, you're competing with the whole online world to some degree, and you need to really stand out by being that specific.
For sure. But even with brick and mortar practices too, like a lot of the stuff, I've helped group practice owners, and I've helped local brick and mortar clinicians as well. With Instagram targeting and Facebook targeting, you could do it all within, whether it's brick and mortar, whether it's online. I think you do really well to niche down, to nano niche down, so that you can speak to that one person. And, at the end of the day, whether you're a high ticket coach like we help therapists become, or whether you're just a brick and mortar clinician, you want to do 1 hour in, 1 hour out, you only need a couple hundred clients a year. Like we're not talking thousands of people. So, if you want to be a postpartum depression specialist and just help, women with their second and third kids, I think there's enough market demand out there that you can really be specific and become an expert, and then you become that trusted advisor, as you were talking about the know, like, and trust factor. So
right, yeah. So with with the online, just the online model, what are maybe some do's and don'ts that you think of when it comes to that? Because what's interesting to me is that you are not, you can work from anywhere in the world, literally. And so what would be some do's and don'ts about setting all of that up and the logistics of that you have found helpful?
Great question. I would say probably the biggest do is make sure you do your research. It's really funny, within the US, we have clients from the East Coast that are really concerned about their license. And so they want to make sure that they're not, so whether they're practicing psychotherapy or coaching, they want to make sure that those are, their services are split out. On the West Coast, though, in California, therapists can advertise in coaching and therapy at the same time. So I always say, start with having a goal in mind. Like, do you want to own a coaching practice? Do you want to own an online therapy practice? And just set it up. And this is an argument. A lot of people come to me, well, they throw their hands up and say, you can't do both. You can't be a coach and a therapist. And I think that's total nonsense. We can own as an individual a therapy business. We can own a coaching business. We can own a consulting business. We can do whatever we want. And but definitely you want to make sure that you protect your license and make sure that you operate with that authenticity, the honesty, the integrity that we need to be operating in. But once you've done that, then I would say the biggest do is just to take action and to go out and put one step in front of the other. And it's going to take a while. You're going to, you can pay for mentorship or you can do it on your own. No matter how you do it, it's going to be a journey nonetheless. And
right.
I love what Winston Churchill says. And he says, the true measure of success is to go from one failure to the next without a loss for enthusiasm. And I can tell you, being a 6-figure brick and mortar clinician, the last month that I was in Canada, invoicing $12,000, to go from that to being in Mexico, where we were a couple of years ago, and sitting around a dining room table with my wife, and our kids were asleep in the room next door, and having only made $400 that month from clients that had followed me from my brick and mortar practice, it was pretty devastating. And those were some pretty stiff headwinds. But just, if you don't give up, you can't fail.
Right.
It's literally impossible.
Right.
So
yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's one of my mantras is to be consistent and persistent with what you do, and just keeping at it, because I think regardless of how you build your practice, those beginning stages, just you've got to get that momentum, and it takes patience to be able to get that momentum. With your practice, how long did it really take you to feel like you had the momentum that you needed to make it sustainable?
Consistently, that was about a year. It took about 12 months of now I'm also a reverse engineer. So I should have paid for coaching. I should have paid for someone that could teach me. The problem is that maybe it's my Dutch background. I don't know what it is, but I had to learn it myself. And so I've watched countless webinars, and I've done tons of trainings, and I've funnel hacked for the last year and 2 years. And, but consistently now, like today I had 3 sales calls, 3 therapists that I've never met before, booked a strategy session with me. I sent out 2 invitations. I don't offer to work with everyone that I have a call with, but 2 of them I sent out an invitation. They could come back and say next week, yeah, Jonathan, we want to get started. And now people just show up. I don't even know who books calls with me, but that was that took a lot of work, and it took a lot of effort. And I don't think you're supposed to get it on the first try. Yeah. I think if it was too easy, everyone would do it, and it wouldn't be fun. And, I remember back when I was doing my graduate training, and I was thinking to myself, I haven't seen a client yet. I'm still doing the didactic portion of my graduate training. I still hadn't done any clinical work at that point. And I was like, this is going to be the only time that I get to be neck deep into the theory of what we do and change theory, and without seeing clients. And I was like, because at that point, everyone wants to rush and see a client. And I'm like, no, I should slow down and just enjoy this, because when I start seeing clients and I get into the applied science of what we do, and it's all great, but let's just enjoy this process. So.
Right. Yeah, I think it's to enjoy the ride. Yeah, we're at whatever stage you're at. I think it's important to do that. So tell folks a little bit about the coaching that you offer for those people that are maybe thinking about starting an online therapy business or therapy practice or coaching practice. And one question that came up for me before we move into that, in your mind, how do you delineate between coaching versus therapy? Because I know that you do both.
Yeah, I see it as, with therapy, our clients come to us with the content. the content is what's going on in their lives. That's what we have to work with. Whereas with coaching, we go to them with the content. So we're teaching them skills and we're giving them. So I only use solution focused brief therapy, and I met Elliot Connie back in Wisconsin a few years back at the AAMFT conference, and I walked right up to him and I said, Elliot, I really love solution focused brief therapy. Can I just do that? Do I have to use any other model? He said, no, Jonathan, if you want, just use that model. You'll be fine. And so I did that. And, I have to think that when it comes to, and now I'm losing my train of thought there just for a second.
Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. But we were just talking about, just delineation between coaching and therapy.
Between coaching. Yeah. So, and thank you so much, because I went off too much on a tangent there. But when I was thinking about the work that we get to do and what we get to offer out to our clients, in my coaching practice, I was teaching couples the tenets of solution-focused brief therapy. I was teaching them the skills of solution-focused brief therapy as my content that I was teaching them. And so it's far more psychoeducational, far more consulting in that way, where you're giving your client something as opposed to them giving you something that you have to kind of piece back together. And I also see it as you attract a different client as well. I find with psychotherapy, you're getting people in the 10, 20% that want to go to the 100%. Whereas with coaching clients, typically they're at the 70, 80, 90%. They want to get that last little bit that they're missing. So.
Right. It's and that one way I've heard it described too is a difference between coaching and therapy is therapy, you're really dealing more with the whole person and just helping them work through whatever it is they're working through, versus coaching tends to work on a specific problem. And so I like that. I like what you also said about that, about, the coaching being more in a teaching role, which is good. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people struggle with that of, you hear in graduate school, you don't want to do coaching. You want to be pure to the models and pure to the, all of that. But I think there's room for both. And like you've alluded to, I think you can do both. You can.
Well, the way I see it is I've always resisted applying labels to my clients. It's fortunately in Canada, we're not asked to make diagnoses. And so if I'm reluctant to label my clients, why would I be so hasty in wanting to label what I do? Right. So rather than seeing myself as just a psychotherapist, when I have a skill set that I know I can offer and help people, and it was something different than psychotherapy. And, psychotherapy isn't the be all and end all intervention for our clients. I would argue that caffeine, tobacco, alcohol are probably first line interventions. When people are stressed, they'll reach for a cigarette or an alcoholic beverage. So we have all those different tools that we can offer people. So we can offer people, if they want coaching, we can offer them coaching. If they want psychotherapy, we can offer them psychotherapy. But don't conflate the two. Don't mix the two. I think that's unethical.
Yeah.
But there's certainly no reason why we couldn't be both. So.
Right. Yeah, I like that. So tell folks a little bit about the services that you offer, particularly for those therapists that are maybe trying to think about going solely online, or living the dream like you are, being able to be anywhere in the world and do your practice.
Yeah, well, I would say 95% of what I do is free. Like I run the Online Therapist Academy Facebook group, and so we just crossed 1,000 members, and we've really only ramped it up about 9 months ago. So it's growing quite nicely. And I go live in the group pretty regularly, almost every week. And so really that's probably the first place to start, is to come and join the group. And so for people that really are serious, that they'd say, therapists, they really are like, I want to take my business online. They can always come check me out there's lots of links everywhere in that Facebook group. You can also go to the onlinetherapistacademy.com.
Right. And we'll have links in the show notes and show summary as well.
Yeah. And, I do three things. I help therapists clarify their message. I help them build an amazing offer, and I help them with all the organic client attraction strategies that we use to get them traffic and to get people hearing their message and seeing their offer. And then, I like to believe that our clients are sophisticated people. You don't need to confuse them. You don't need to overwhelm them. You can say, look, you're in trouble in your relationship. This is what I solve. If you want help, send me a message and we can get started. So,
right. Yeah. So like I said, we'll have all that links to all your stuff in the show notes and that sort of thing. And I want to be respectful of your time, Jonathan. And particularly, I'm very grateful to you for staying up till midnight where you are to record with me this day. So I appreciate you doing that. And so hopefully we'll have some more conversations here in the future. And I'm so glad you joined me for the podcast.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on. It's been a real pleasure.
Right. And tell folks again, just real quickly before we stop, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you besides the Facebook group?
Sure. Either the Facebook group, or they can just head to onlinetherapistacademy.com and you'll see a bunch of my links, and there's the training that people can take that I offer as well. So,
okay. Awesome. Well, thanks, Jonathan. It's been a great conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Gordon. Appreciate having me on. So.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed hearing from Jonathan. I am just so intrigued with just different ways of doing practice, and I really get excited about people doing things kind of outside the box and kind of in non-traditional ways. It's just, I think one of the things that can be very limiting for us is if we don't allow ourselves to think outside the box. And that's one of the things that Jonathan has done. And it's really created a lifestyle and the freedom that he would like for he and his family. And the fact that they're living remotely and kind of living the dream, so to speak, of living abroad and at the same time having a practice that not only does coaching, but also traditional therapy. And go check out Jonathan's stuff. Again, he's available to consult and help you maybe thinking about creating a teletherapy practice or working remotely. And so go be sure to check out his things. And you can find out more about Jonathan at the onlinetherapistacademy.com. And check out his website. He's got some great content there and great information for folks. Also, be sure to check out today's sponsor for the podcast, TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. They are the #1 electronic health record system for therapists. They're who I use in my practice, and I absolutely couldn't live without them in my practice. So be sure to check them out. And if you go over there to therapynotes.com and use the coupon code Gordon, you can try them out for 2 months for free. So be sure to do that. Also, be sure to put on your calendars, mark your calendars for the next webinar that's coming out March 17th. And it's going to be on contractors versus employees, on hiring people for your practice, whether it's clinicians or virtual assistants or whoever you might be hiring for your practice as you grow. Be sure and check out that free webinar. And you can get to that at practiceoftherapy.com/hiring webinar. Just hiring webinar after practiceoftherapy.com. And the other thing too, I'll just say again, is I really would like to invite you to be a part of the focus groups I'm starting in March. There's going to be limited seating, a limited number of spots for that. So be sure to apply now so that you can grab your spot and really dig in deep to your practice and get the mentoring and coaching that you deserve to make your practice successful. And you can get to that by going to practiceoftherapy.com focus group. And I look forward to hearing from you and hope you'll apply to those focus groups that are coming up. So that's it for today, folks. I've got lots of great guests lined up. I was looking at my calendar today, and it looks like I've got at least 6 guests that I've got to interview that are coming up for the Practice of Therapy podcast. So a lot of exciting information, a lot of interesting people for you to meet. So take care, folks. I hope you have a good rest of your week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this. Take care, folks. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.